Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Earth Defense Station Omega-7, watching the red planet Mars slowly rotate beneath them. The year 2157 had been quiet until today. His coffee mug sat half empty on the command console while he reviewed the morning reports. Everything seemed normal. Lisa Carter checked her weapons systems for the third time that hour. As the station's weapons specialist, she always kept their plasma cannons ready. The blue-haired woman from Texas had never seen real combat, but her training scores were perfect. She hoped they would stay that way. Tony Rodriguez worked in the engine room, fine-tuning the fusion reactors that powered their orbital station. The young engineer from California hummed while he worked. His tools made soft clicking sounds as he adjusted the power flow. Amy Foster sat at her communication station, monitoring the usual chatter between Earth and the outer colonies. The quiet morning ended when Amy's screens lit up with warning signals. Her brown eyes went wide as she stared at the readings. "Captain, I'm picking up massive energy signatures approaching from beyond Jupiter." Jake set down his coffee and moved to her station. The readings showed something huge moving toward them. "How massive are we talking about?" "Bigger than anything we've ever built," Amy replied, her voice shaking slightly. "The computer says there are hundreds of them." Lisa's weapons board started beeping as the unknown contacts came closer. "Captain, whatever those things are, they're not showing up in our friendly ship database." Jake felt his stomach drop. First contact protocols existed, but no one really believed they would ever need them. "Amy, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we have unknown contacts approaching Mars orbit." The ships appeared on their main screen like jewels floating in space. Each vessel looked like it was made from pure crystal, with smooth surfaces that caught and reflected starlight. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls shimmering with colors that human eyes had never seen before. Tony came running from the engine room when the proximity alarm started screaming. "Captain, what's happening up here?" "We're about to find out," Jake said, watching the alien fleet take positions around their station. The largest ship moved directly in front of them, its crystal hull pulsing with soft blue light. A new voice came through their communication system, speaking perfect English with strange musical tones. "Human vessel, this is Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. You will prepare to receive me aboard your station." Jake looked at his crew. None of them had trained for this moment, but here it was anyway. "Amy, respond to them. Tell them we're ready to talk." "Already doing it, Captain," she said, her fingers flying over her controls. 20 minutes later, a small crystal shuttle docked with their station. Jake waited in the main airlock with Lisa and Tony behind him. The airlock cycled, and the door opened to reveal something that would change everything. Ambassador Veltar stood 7 feet tall with skin that shifted between blue and silver depending on the light. His eyes were completely black, and when he moved, his body seemed to flow like water. He wore armor that looked like it was made from the same crystal as his ships. "Greetings, humans," Veltar said, his voice echoing strangely in the metal corridor. "I bring you an offer from the Zephyrian Empire." Jake stepped forward, trying to look more confident than he felt. "I'm Captain Morrison." "What kind of offer?" Veltar smiled, showing teeth that looked like they were carved from diamonds. "Surrender your world and colonies to us, and your species will be allowed to serve the Empire. Refuse, and you will be destroyed." Lisa's hand moved toward her sidearm, but Jake caught her eye and shook his head slightly. "That's quite an ultimatum. What makes you think we can't defend ourselves?" The alien ambassador laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Your weapons are primitive toys compared to our technology. Allow me to demonstrate." Veltar spoke into a small device on his wrist. Within minutes, one of the smaller crystal ships moved into position near the station. "Have your weapons specialist fire your most powerful weapon at my scout ship." Jake looked at Lisa, who shrugged. "Captain, our plasma cannons pack enough punch to vaporize a small asteroid." "Do it," Jake said. Lisa ran to the weapons station and powered up their main cannon. The plasma beam shot out in a brilliant blue-white line, striking the alien ship directly. The crystal hull absorbed the energy and distributed it across the surface in waves of pretty colors. When the light faded, the ship was completely undamaged. "Impressive light show," Veltar said calmly. "Our quantum shell armor absorbs all forms of electromagnetic radiation and disperses kinetic energy through quantum field manipulation." "Your weapons cannot harm us." Tony stared at the undamaged ship in disbelief. "That's impossible. Nothing can just absorb that much energy." Many things are possible when you have advanced beyond primitive chemical and nuclear reactions, Veltar replied. We have conquered 1,000 worlds with this technology. Earth will be no different. Jake felt the weight of his responsibility settling on his shoulders. How long do we have to consider your offer? You have one of your planetary rotations, Veltar said. 24 hours. After that, we will begin our conquest. Your scattered colonies will fall first, then your homeworld. The alien ambassador turned and walked back toward his shuttle. Do not waste time planning resistance. Your weapons are useless against us. After Veltar left, Jake and his crew stood in stunned silence. Lisa broke first. Captain, we have to warn Earth Command. Already on it, Amy said from her station. But the transmission lag to Earth is 8 minutes each way. Jake watched the alien fleet through the main viewport. Hundreds of crystal ships waited in perfect formation, their hulls glowing softly in the darkness of space. Each one was protected by armor that made humanity's best weapons look like toys. Tony, get me everything you can about how that armor works, Jake ordered. Lisa, contact all our defense stations and tell them what we just saw. Amy, send everything to Earth Command, including full sensor recordings. As his crew worked frantically around him, Jake Morrison stared at the alien fleet and wondered if this was how humanity would end. Not with a bang, but with a whimper as they faced technology they couldn't hope to match. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds. Their armor was perfect, their weapons unstoppable. In 24 hours, they would begin destroying everything humans had built among the stars. Jake picked up his coffee mug and found it was cold. Somehow that small detail made everything feel more real. In one day, nothing would ever be the same again. Dr. Helen Parker sat in the Emergency War Council room deep inside Luna Base, watching the most powerful people in the solar system argue about surrender. The round table was crowded with military leaders and government officials, all talking at once about evacuation plans and defensive strategies that everyone knew would fail. Admiral Chris Bennett pounded his fist on the metal table. We need to get as many civilians as possible to the outer colonies before those crystal ships reach Earth. General Kate Sullivan shook her head, her gray hair catching the harsh fluorescent lights. The aliens said they would hit the colonies first. There's nowhere to run. Then we fight, said Captain Roy Harper, commander of the heavy cruiser USS Liberty. We have 300 ships in the fleet. Maybe if we hit them all at once, with what? Admiral Bennett interrupted. You saw the report from Omega-7. Their armor absorbs our plasma weapons like their flashlights. Helen had been listening to the same arguments for 2 hours. Every plan involved weapons that the aliens had already proven useless. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, she said in her quiet voice. The room kept arguing. Excuse me, she said louder. Still nothing. Finally, she slammed her hand on the table hard enough to make everyone's coffee cups jump. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the small woman with brown hair and thick glasses who usually spent her time studying old battles instead of fighting new ones. You're all thinking about this wrong, Helen said. The alien armor absorbs electromagnetic radiation and disperses kinetic energy through quantum field manipulation. Those are very specific defenses designed to counter very specific threats. General Sullivan frowned. Dr. Parker, we appreciate your historical perspective, but this isn't a history lesson. We need practical solutions. Helen smiled for the first time in hours. Actually, General, this is exactly a history lesson. Follow me. She led the confused group of military leaders through the winding corridors of Luna Base, down 3 levels to sections most people had forgotten existed. The elevator descended past the main living areas, past the mining operations, past the manufacturing centers, all the way to sub-level 7. The doors opened to reveal a massive storage facility filled with rows upon rows of metal containers. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled old and forgotten. Helen walked to the nearest container and entered an access code she had memorized years ago during her research. The container hissed open, revealing foam padding that held dozens of strange-looking devices. Admiral Bennett picked one up and turned it over in his hands. It was made of black metal and plastic with a long tube and a curved piece underneath. What is this thing? He asked. That's an M4 carbine, Helen explained. A kinetic projectile weapon that uses chemical explosives to propel small metal bullets at high velocity. It was standard issue for Earth military forces until 2089. Lieutenant Danny Kim, the youngest officer in the group, examined the weapon with fascination. I've read about these in old training manuals. But why did we stop using them? Helen opened another container, this one filled with small brass cylinders. Because energy weapons were more efficient, had unlimited ammunition through power cells, and didn't require manufacturing physical projectiles. Plasma rifles replaced everything. She picked up one of the brass cylinders and held it up to the light. This is a 5.56mm NATO round. It contains a lead bullet weighing 62 grains propelled by a chemical charge that produces roughly 300 foot-pounds of energy. Captain Harper looked confused. Dr. Parker, I don't understand how ancient weapons are supposed to help us fight an interstellar empire. Helen walked to another container and opened it to reveal much larger weapons with long barrels and complex scopes. The alien armor is designed to detect and counter advanced threats. Energy signatures, quantum fluctuations, electromagnetic patterns. But what if we used weapons that don't register as threats? She lifted one of the larger weapons, struggling slightly with its weight. This is a Barrett M82 50 caliber sniper rifle. It fires a bullet that weighs 750 grains at 2,800 feet per second. No energy signature, no quantum manipulation, no electromagnetic radiation, just basic Newtonian physics. General Sullivan was starting to understand. You're saying their fancy armor won't recognize bullets as weapons? Exactly, Helen said, setting the rifle down carefully. Their technology has advanced so far beyond kinetic weapons that their defensive systems probably don't even scan for them. To their quantum sensors, a bullet would look like space debris. Danny Kim was examining the ammunition with growing excitement. The aliens said their armor disperses kinetic energy, but there are limits to any system. If you hit something hard enough and fast enough, physics wins every time. Helen led them deeper into the storage area, opening container after container. Inside were thousands of weapons from humanity's past. Assault rifles, machine guns, pistols, sniper rifles, and millions of rounds of ammunition in dozens of different calibers. When Earth Command centralized all military equipment in 2089, they didn't destroy the old weapons, Helen explained. They just stored them in places like this, thinking they might be useful for historical displays or emergency situations. Admiral Bennett picked up a simple pistol and checked its mechanism. How much of this stuff do we have? Every major base and colony has storage facilities like this one, Helen said. Earth Command was very thorough about collecting everything. There should be enough small arms to outfit every person in the solar system. Captain Harper was reading the specifications on a rifle case. But will these things actually work after sitting in storage for 68 years? Danny Kim had already figured that out. He had found a maintenance kit and was field stripping an M4 with practiced efficiency. The storage conditions are perfect, and these weapons were built to last. Give me a few hours and I can have a dozen of them ready for testing. General Sullivan was studying a diagram on one of the ammunition boxes. The question is whether bullets can actually penetrate alien armor. Their hull material might still be strong enough to stop kinetic projectiles. Helen nodded. That's why we need to test different calibers and bullet designs. Some of these rounds are designed to penetrate vehicle armor. If we're lucky, we might find something that can punch through crystal hull plating. Admiral Bennett looked around the storage facility with new eyes. Weapons that had been obsolete for decades suddenly represented humanity's only hope. Dr. Parker, how long would it take to distribute these weapons to our forces? The transport ships could have weapons and ammunition to every major installation within 12 hours, Helen said. But first we need to know if they actually work against alien technology. Danny Kim had finished assembling his test rifle and was loading a magazine with practiced movements. There's only one way to find out. We need to get our hands on some alien armor and start shooting holes in it. The room fell quiet as everyone realized what that meant. Somewhere in the solar system, they would need to capture or kill aliens to test weapons that might not even work. But it was the only plan anyone had proposed that didn't involve immediate surrender or certain death. Admiral Bennett made the decision for all of them. Dr. Parker, you just gave us our first real hope in this war. Let's go find out if bullets can beat quantum armor. The captured Zephyrian probe sat in the center of Testing Bay 7, its crystal hull still glowing with the same blue shimmer that had protected the alien fleet. Engineer Marcus Webb finished setting up the reinforced barriers around the testing area while Dr. Rachel Moore calibrated her instruments to measure quantum field fluctuations. Captain Steve Miller held the modified M16 rifle in his hands, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the ancient weapon. The black metal was cold against his palms and the smell of gun oil filled his nostrils. He had trained on energy weapons his entire military career, but Danny Kim had spent the last 6 hours teaching him how to load, aim, and fire chemical projectile weapons. The probe is approximately the same size as an alien fighter craft, Marcus said, checking his tablet. Hull thickness appears to be about 3 centimeters of crystal material over a metal framework. Rachel stared at her quantum field detector, watching the readings spike and fall in regular patterns. The armor is definitely active. I'm seeing the same energy signatures we recorded during the demonstration at Omega 7. The probe had been captured during a raid on one of Jupiter's moons, where a small alien scouting party had been gathering intelligence on human mining operations. The cost had been high, 12 soldiers killed and a mining station destroyed, but they had managed to disable one enemy craft and bring Hub back for study. Steve raised the rifle to his shoulder and sighted down the barrel at the glowing alien hull. Range is 30 meters. Danny said to aim for the center mass and squeeze the trigger slowly. Wait, Rachel called out, her eyes fixed on her instruments. I want to record exactly what happens to the quantum field when you fire. Marcus activated the high-speed cameras positioned around the testing bay. All recording systems are active. Whenever you're ready, Captain. Steve took a deep breath and pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder with a sharp crack that echoed through the metal chamber. The 5.56mm bullet crossed the 30 meters in a fraction of a second and struck the probe's hull with a metallic ping. Everyone rushed to examine the results. Where the bullet had hit, there was a small hole punched clean through the crystal armor. The metal beneath showed a bright scratch where the projectile had gouged the surface before ricocheting away. Rachel stared at her instruments in disbelief. The quantum field didn't react at all. It's like the bullet didn't exist as far as the armor was concerned. Marcus ran his fingers around the entry hole, feeling the rough edges where the crystal had shattered. The bullet went through the armor like it was glass. No energy absorption, no field dispersion, just basic penetration physics. Steve lowered the rifle, hardly believing what he had just seen. That actually worked. We just put a hole in alien armor with a 70-year-old rifle. They spent the next hour testing different weapons and ammunition types. The .22 caliber rounds from a small pistol bounced off the underlying metal plating, without causing significant damage. The 9mm rounds from standard sidearms punched through the crystal, but only dented the metal beneath. When Steve picked up the .308 Winchester hunting rifle, the results were dramatically different. The larger bullet not only penetrated the crystal armor, but punched completely through the metal framework and out the other side of the probe. Now we're talking, Marcus said, examining the clean holes on both sides of the alien craft. That round had enough energy to defeat both the armor system and the structural hull. Rachel was taking detailed measurements of each impact point. The crystal armor isn't just being bypassed, it's being completely ignored. The quantum field system doesn't recognize chemical projectiles as threats worth responding to. The real test came when Steve picked up the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. The massive weapon was heavy and awkward, requiring a bipod support system to aim properly. Danny Kim had loaded it with armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate tank hulls. This is going to be loud, Steve warned, settling behind the rifle and adjusting the scope. The .50 caliber round hit the probe with devastating effect. A section of crystal armor the size of a dinner plate simply disintegrated, and the metal beneath crumpled inward from the massive impact. Fragments of alien hull material scattered across the testing bay floor. Marcus whistled as he surveyed the damage. That round delivered over 13,000 foot-pounds of energy. The armor system couldn't have dispersed that much kinetic force even if it had tried. Rachel was practically dancing with excitement as she reviewed her data. The quantum field readings are fascinating. The armor is designed to detect incoming threats based on energy signatures and movement patterns. But bullets move too fast and have too simple a trajectory for the system to classify them as weapons. Steve set down the Barrett rifle and rubbed his shoulder where the massive recoil had bruised him. So their armor thinks bullets are just space debris? Essentially, yes, Rachel explained. The Zephyrian defensive technology is so advanced that it doesn't recognize primitive kinetic weapons as legitimate threats. It's like using a computer virus scanner to detect a rock thrown through a window. Marcus was already making calculations on his tablet. If we can mass-produce ammunition and retrofit our ships with kinetic weapon systems, we might actually have a chance in this war. Word of the successful test spread through Luna Base within hours. In the deepest levels of the facility, Manufacturing equipment that had been idle for decades roared back to life. Assembly lines designed to produce plasma rifle components were hastily converted to manufacture bullets and gunpowder. Technical teams across the solar system received urgent messages containing detailed specifications for kinetic weapon systems. On Ceres Station, miners who had been preparing to evacuate instead began converting their drilling equipment into crude artillery pieces. The asteroid belt facilities started producing solid tungsten rods that could be fired from modified railguns. Dr. Helen Parker watched the production reports coming in from across human space. Factories on Mars were churning out millions of rounds of ammunition. The orbital shipyards around Earth had halted construction of new plasma-armed vessels and were instead retrofitting existing ships with chemical projectile weapons. "It's ironic," Helen said to Admiral Bennett as they reviewed the manufacturing schedules. "We're fighting the most advanced alien empire in the galaxy, with weapons our ancestors used in the early 21st century. Admiral Bennett nodded grimly. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The question now is whether we can produce enough ammunition and train enough soldiers before the aliens finish their preparations." The testing had proven that human kinetic weapons could defeat Zephyrian armor, but the war was far from won. Across the solar system, millions of people were learning to use weapons their great-grandparents would have recognized. The future of humanity now depended on bullets and gunpowder, the most primitive tools of war. In Testing Bay 7, the destroyed probe served as proof that even the most advanced technology could have unexpected weaknesses. The whole riddled alien craft would become a symbol of human ingenuity and determination. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective ones. Colonel Rick Hayes crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a hovercar in the ruins of Luna City, watching a Zephyrian patrol march down what used to be Main Street. The alien soldiers moved with casual confidence, their crystal armor gleaming in the artificial sunlight of the domed city. They had grown careless after 3 weeks of unopposed occupation. Sergeant Maria Santos lay flat on a rooftop 50 meters away, her eye pressed to the scope of a modified hunting rifle. The former police sniper had volunteered for the resistance the day the aliens landed. Corporal Billy Thompson crouched in a doorway to the left, clutching an old shotgun loaded with slugs. Ashley Roberts waited in the shadows of an alley, her Barrett .50 caliber rifle trained on the patrol leader. The 4 aliens walked in formation, their black eyes scanning the empty streets for signs of human activity. Most of the civilian population had been rounded up and placed in detention camps outside the city, but small groups of fighters remained hidden in the underground tunnels and abandoned buildings. Rick spoke into his radio headset using barely a whisper. "All teams, targets in sight. Remember, aim for center mass and fire on my signal." The patrol stopped directly in front of the memorial fountain in the city center. The lead alien, a tall figure with silver markings on his armor, spoke into a communication device attached to his wrist. Rick could see the blue shimmer of quantum field energy dancing across the alien's protective shell. "Now," Rick said quietly. 4 rifles fired almost simultaneously. The sound of gunshots echoed through the empty streets like thunder. All 4 aliens dropped immediately, their supposedly impenetrable armor pierced by simple lead bullets traveling at high velocity. Rick and his team moved quickly to collect alien weapons and equipment before reinforcements could arrive. The crystal energy rifles were useless to humans, but the communication devices might provide valuable intelligence about enemy movements. "Command, this is Team 7, Rick reported as they retreated through a maintenance tunnel. 4 tangos down in Sector 12. No human casualties. Similar reports were coming in from resistance cells across the occupied territories. On Mars, civilian fighters armed with hunting rifles ambushed alien supply convoys traveling between the captured mining stations. The Zephyrians had expected organized military resistance using advanced weapons, not scattered groups of farmers and mechanics with deer rifles. Pete Anderson had been fixing hover cars in New Phoenix until the aliens took over. Now he crouched in a drainage ditch beside the main highway, watching an alien transport truck approach his position. The mechanic had never been in the military, but his grandfather had taught him to shoot when he was 12 years old. The transport was escorted by 2 Zephyrian soldiers walking alongside the vehicle. Pete waited until they were directly in front of his hiding spot, before opening fire with his grandfather's old bolt-action rifle. Both guards collapsed before they could raise an alarm. Pete climbed into the alien truck and found it loaded with strange equipment and containers of glowing liquid. He couldn't read the alien writing, but anything the enemy needed was worth destroying. The timer on his improvised explosive device gave him 5 minutes to get clear before the truck turned into a smoking crater. In the asteroid belt, Laura Mitchell coordinated attacks from her hidden base inside a hollowed-out mining asteroid. The former schoolteacher had become one of the most effective resistance leaders in the outer system. Using her knowledge of the belt's complex layout to strike at enemy positions and disappear before they could respond, the aliens are using the same patrol routes every day, she told her team of volunteer fighters. They're not adapting their tactics because they don't consider us a real threat. Her fighters used modified mining equipment to launch chunks of metal at alien ships passing through the belt. The improvised projectiles moved too slowly to be detected by the enemy's advanced sensors, but they hit hard enough to damage hull plating and disable critical systems. On Europa Station, Commander Nick Powell had turned the moon's ice mining tunnels into a nightmare for the occupying forces. His guerrilla fighters moved through the underground passages like ghosts, striking at alien positions and vanishing back into the maze of tunnels before reinforcements could arrive. The Zephyrians had superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. Every time they sent patrols into the tunnels, some of their soldiers failed to return. The humans were fighting a war of attrition using weapons the aliens couldn't detect until bullets started flying. Ambassador Veltar received increasingly frantic reports from his field commanders as human resistance spread across the occupied territories. In his command center aboard the flagship, he studied tactical displays showing dozens of small-scale attacks happening simultaneously across multiple worlds. "This is impossible," he told his lieutenant Kexmore. "Our sensors show no large-scale military movements, no energy weapon signatures, no coordinated battle formations. How are the humans inflicting so much damage?" Kexmore analyzed footage from one of the attacks on Luna City. The recording showed Zephyrian soldiers falling to invisible threats, their armor failing to protect them from weapons that registered as little more than background noise on their detection systems. The humans appear to be using primitive kinetic projectile weapons, Kexmore reported. "Our quantum shields are not designed to intercept such basic technology." Veltar felt a chill run through his crystalline spine. "Show me the technical specifications of their weapons." The analysis revealed the horrible truth. Human bullets were too simple and too fast for Zephyrian armor to recognize as legitimate threats. The quantum field systems that had protected the Empire for centuries were useless against chunks of lead propelled by chemical explosives. "Order all ground forces to maintain constant movement," Veltar commanded. "No more regular patrols, no more predictable routes, and issue body armor designed to stop physical projectiles." But the damage was already done. Word of human victories was spreading through the resistance networks, inspiring more civilians to take up arms against the occupiers. Former soldiers taught mechanics and teachers how to use rifles. Farmers shared hunting knowledge with office workers. The entire human population was becoming an army of snipers and saboteurs. Back on Luna City, Rick Hayes prepared for another night operation. His team had grown from 4 fighters to 20 as more volunteers joined the resistance. They had captured enough alien equipment to understand enemy communication protocols and movement patterns. "The aliens are scared," Maria Santos observed as she cleaned her rifle. "They're changing their tactics, adding more guards, avoiding predictable routes." Rick nodded grimly. "Good. Fear makes people make mistakes, and we're going to keep giving them reasons to be afraid." The underground war was just beginning, and humanity was proving that sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones no one saw coming. Admiral Chris Bennett stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the largest human fleet ever assembled, prepare for what would either be their greatest victory or their final defeat. 300 ships hung in space around Earth's orbital defense platforms, each one retrofitted with weapons that would have been considered antiques just months before. Captain Roy Harper checked the status of his ship's new kinetic weapon systems. The Liberty's plasma cannons had been replaced with experimental railguns that fired solid tungsten rods instead of energy beams. The modification had taken 6 weeks of around-the-clock work by engineering teams who had never seen such primitive technology. "All ships report, ready for Operation Sledgehammer," came the voice of Communications Officer Amy Foster from her station on the command deck. The Zephyrian fleet is maintaining position around the moon. The alien armada had grown to over 800 ships as reinforcements arrived from across their empire. Admiral Thexnall commanded the invasion force from his massive flagship, confident that human resistance would collapse once their homeworld came under direct attack. On the surface of Earth, General Kate Sullivan coordinated the ground defense from her bunker deep beneath the ruins of Geneva. Her forces were armed with every kinetic weapon that could be manufactured or salvaged from storage facilities around the globe. Soldiers who had trained their entire careers on energy weapons now carried rifles that their great-grandfathers would have recognized. The space battle began when the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation. Thexnall had decided to make an example of Earth's orbital stations before demanding surrender. His crystal ships advanced in perfect lines, their quantum armor shimmering with protective energy fields. All ships. This is Admiral Bennett, the human commander announced over the fleet communication system. Remember, these weapons have no electronic signatures. Get in close and make every shot count. The USS Liberty led the charge, followed by 200 smaller vessels armed with everything from modified mining equipment to ancient artillery pieces mounted on spaceship hulls. The human fleet looked like a collection of scrap metal compared to the elegant crystal ships of the Empire. Thexnall watched the approaching human vessels with amusement. Their ships appear to be armed with primitive chemical projectiles, he told his bridge crew. Our armor will absorb their attacks as easily as it did their energy weapons. The first human salvo proved him wrong. Tungsten rods fired from railguns punched through crystal hulls like they were made of glass. Ancient cannons loaded with solid shot tore holes in ships that had never been damaged by any weapon in their 1,000-year history. Impossible. Thexnall gasped as he watched 3 of his escorts explode from impacts that his sensors had barely detected. How are their primitive weapons penetrating our defenses? Captain Harper smiled grimly as the Liberty's railguns fired again, sending another Zephyrian cruiser spinning out of control with massive holes in its hull. Because sometimes old-fashioned beats high-tech. The space battle turned into chaos as human ships swarmed through the alien formation like angry wasps. The Zephyrians tried to maintain their precise formations, but kinetic weapons fired from unexpected angles kept finding gaps in their defenses. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the real test was beginning. Zephyrian dropships descended through the atmosphere, carrying thousands of alien soldiers to secure major population centers. General Sullivan's ground forces waited in hidden positions, armed with weapons that couldn't be detected by enemy sensors. The first alien landing force touched down outside what used to be London. Colonel Rick Hayes commanded the defense, having been recalled from Luna City after his success with guerrilla tactics. His soldiers lay hidden in rubble and abandoned buildings, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Zephyrian soldiers advanced across the bombed-out landscape with the same confidence they had shown during the occupation of the colonies. Their quantum armor glowed with protective energy as they marched toward the city center. All units weapons free, Rick commanded over his radio. Light them up. 1,000 rifles opened fire simultaneously from concealed positions throughout the ruins. The advancing alien army collapsed like wheat before a scythe, as bullets found their marks through armor that had never failed before. Sergeant Jack Foster crouched behind a concrete barrier, working the bolt of his grandfather's hunting rifle with practiced efficiency. Each shot dropped another alien soldier, their advanced armor useless against simple lead bullets traveling at 2,500 feet per second. Corporal Emma Davis moved through the ruins with her squad, hunting down the few aliens who had survived the initial ambush. The former computer programmer had become an expert marksman during her training with the Resistance, proving that ordinary people could become extraordinary soldiers when their world was at stake. Back in space, Admiral Thexnall made the desperate decision to retreat as his fleet disintegrated around him. Half of his ships were either destroyed or disabled by weapons that his technology couldn't counter. The supposedly primitive humans had turned his invasion into a disaster. All ships, fall back to the outer system, he ordered, his voice thick with disbelief. We need to regroup and develop new defensive strategies. But the human fleet pursued relentlessly, their crude weapons continuing to find targets among the fleeing crystal ships. Captain Harper's Liberty led the chase, its railguns firing tungsten projectiles that turned elegant alien vessels into expanding clouds of debris. On the ground, Ambassador Veltar found himself trapped in a human command bunker, as his personal guard fell around him to weapons they had dismissed as primitive toys. The alien diplomat who had once demanded Earth's surrender now faced Captain Jake Morrison across a room littered with fallen Zephyrian soldiers. "You deliberately chose inferior weapons," Veltar said, blue blood seeping through cracks in his damaged armor. "Your people rejected advanced technology in favor of crude kinetic projectiles." Jake Morrison chambered another round in his M4 rifle, the metallic click echoing in the silent bunker. "We didn't reject anything. We just remembered that sometimes the best tool for the job is the one nobody expects." The alien ambassador's black eyes widened as he finally understood the magnitude of his empire's mistake. "Your species fought a technological war with primitive weapons. You won by refusing to play by our rules." "That's what humans do," Jake replied. "We adapt. We improvise. We find solutions that nobody else would think of." The Zephyrian Empire's invasion of Earth ended not with the thunder of energy weapons or the flash of plasma explosions, but with the simple crack of gunpowder and the whistle of bullets cutting through space. Their perfect armor had been defeated by weapons that predated spaceflight. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy within days. The empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds had been turned back by a species that fought with bullets and determination. The Zephyrian fleet limped home, their reputation for invincibility shattered by human ingenuity. Earth celebrated, but the lessons of the war were not forgotten. In weapons factories across human space, production lines that had been hastily converted to manufacture ammunition continued their work. Humanity had learned that the most advanced technology wasn't always the most effective, and they would never again put all their faith in a single type of weapon. The galaxy would remember the day that bullets beat quantum armor, and the species that proved superior technology could be defeated by superior thinking.